This is the Real Footy Podcast for Round 8. Thanks for joining us to tip the round. My name's Andrew Wu and I'm joined by Peter Ryan. Hello, how are you, Pete?
G'day, Wooey. Good to be here.
We might need a bigger studio next week because Pete's head is massive at the moment and we may need another seat for his ego because everything's just getting out of control.
Well, that's fair enough because I'm 2 up. Not only am I 2 up at the moment, and I know it's only May, but I'm just waiting for you to, mention the war, which is congratulations or thank yous to me for assisting you last week.
Oh, that was just a bit of theatre. I would have tipped Gold Coast anyway.
Oh, that is the biggest.
I was heavily leaning that way.
So, me threatening you with, just ridicule, and hearing you say, okay, I'll tip Gold Coast, had nothing to do with me. I was sitting at home thinking, I've tipped Richmond and I've helped you get an extra tip by tipping the Suns. Well done, Willie.
I needed
great
that
courage.
Tip. That actually helped me win the round, along with yourself with 7. The maligned Michael Gleeson also on 7. And Matthew Stokes also 7, runner-up last year. So our leaderboard sees Pete on top on 46, 2 clear of Mark McGowan and John Perrick on 44 and Libby Birch on 43.
I'm ripe to fall apart. I'm starting to feel the pressure. A few people are starting to tell me that I'm going okay, and that's a disaster.
Follow your processes, Pete.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, we'll get to business. And the round starts on Friday night with probably the best game of the round, Carlton and Brisbane at Marvel Stadium.
Absolutely the best game of the round, I would think, Andrew, and the toughest to tip. Obviously, Carlton at home at Marvel Stadium always gives them a bit of an advantage over an interstate rival, but Brisbane Lions are flying, won 4 or 5 of their last consecutive games, so they're really shaping up as a top 4 team, whereas Carlton are still like a bit of a bit rickety. I've gone, though, with Carlton this week. I think I saw enough against the West Coast Eagles, not to really excite me, but just to get them a little bit of confidence and that run that they've got back from Adam Sard and Sam Doherty being back in the team. And I think that the thing that happens when you fall against a team like St Kilda and have a poor performance against Adelaide is that you actually do have time to reset a couple of things, and I think they'll be able to make the Brisbane Lions' weakness, which is their defence, struggle through Curnow and Mackay and get enough goals to get the job done.
Yes, I tend to agree. I think this is a very hard game to tip. I don't think there'll be much in it all night. No Rich or Zorko.
Exactly.
Big outs for the Lions. I mean, Zorko's one of their quicker players, bit of speed, and Rich really helps them move the ball quickly as well, so that takes a lot of speed out of their game. They played Docklands pretty well, Marvel Stadium. I mean, they were at, I think, 5 of the last 6 they've won, so up until earlier this year. So I think it's more the MCG, which troubles them a little bit.
That's
Brisbane.
true. I only found out last week Port Adelaide had won about 7 of their previous days.
We should have done our homework before that.
Yep.
Blues get Motlop back. Jesse Motlop after suspension, so he'll be a big in on that surface, fast deck. And I quite like the way that Carlton has changed in the last couple of weeks. I think they really went back to basics after Adelaide, got their contest game back into good shape. We saw it against St Kilda. They couldn't quite get the ball movement right, but they didn't have their 2 best ball users in Doherty and Sard. They're back.
Would you call Doherty a good ball user? I think he's a great player, but I don't think his ball use is his biggest strength.
Oh, I think he's one of the better kicks in the team. I think he works the angles really well.
No, fair enough.
Doherty.
Maybe he takes hard kicks because he does miss occasionally.
Well, you've got to take the game on, don't you?
Yeah, like tip Gold Coast occasionally.
You've lost my train of thought here.
Yeah.
But I think at Docklands, Carlton play that game well, play that ground well, suits them. And I think they've, last week against West Coast, you want to see it against a stronger team, but they got all their mechanics right. The way they played, I thought, was really sound.
Just in terms of if 10 is very confident and 1 is just, what's your level of confidence about tipping Carlton?
Oh, I've only tipped them by a goal, so
right. Yeah, I'm the same. I don't. It's definitely a 50-50 game. You could go either way.
I expect them to play well though. So
yeah. Well, you always expect them to play well, which is it's hilarious.
Well, we'll start Saturday afternoon. This is we go from one of the swing games to one of the real unbackable games, Richmond versus West Coast. I mean, after watching West Coast play last week, they're going to struggle against most teams, especially on the road.
Yeah, you're not going to tip West Coast unless you're... I actually met someone on the weekend who had tipped West Coast to beat Carlton.
Was that because you said they had half a chance?
No, they just tipped them because we thought, due respect to this person, it was a silly thing to do. But there's a lot of one-sided games on paper, and this is one of them, Richmond at the MCG. Even though Richmond, you don't really back them or tip them with any confidence either. But you have to tip them. There's no getting away from it. And if they lose to West Coast... that manure that got dropped off when Jeff Geesham was coach, that'll be backed up again in outside Punt Road, I think. But no worries, Tigers will get there.
Wasn't that... didn't Danny Frawley, under his era, they had dropped a truckload of chicken hearts as well? Or
possibly. There's been a few things that went on at Richmond, poor old Punt Road. But, they're going through a bit of a slump now, but I think they'll get back on the winners list.
Yeah, I think Richmond win this quite comfortably, and if they don't, then there's plenty to write about next week. The other Saturday afternoon game, it's quite a good one actually, Geelong against Adelaide down the highway. Adelaide were very good last week, probably a bit unlucky in the end not to get the job done, given that they had so much of the ball in the first quarter and couldn't turn their dominance into a decent lead.
Well, and I don't mean to sound smug here, but you make your own luck, don't you? And they certainly kicked inaccurately and left the door open for Collingwood, and then went into their shell in the last quarter, and Collingwood were able to really pull off a victory that they didn't in fact deserve to win, but they did enough to just get over the line, which was very handy in the tipping stakes, given when I tipped Collingwood. But Geelong at home, even though Sam De Conning's a big out, as Mick Gleeson revealed yesterday, that he's got a nose, had surgery on his nose.
Hope he's got a nose.
Yeah,
still
didn't
hope
sound
he's got a
too
nose.
Good. That he is a big out for them, and he's been playing in the ruck, so they'll probably be able to cover defensively for him. But with Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron and the midfield, Patrick Dangerfield, playing as well as he has been in the last 3 or 4 weeks against his old team, the Crows, I think they'll do too much damage on the scoreboard, but it could be a bit of a shootout because defensively Geelong are just going at the moment. They conceded 100 points to Essendon, and Adelaide's got a better attack than Essendon do, so they'll want to improve in that area to make sure that they get the win.
They haven't really put the complete game yet, have they, Geelong? I mean, they've tended to blow sides out of the water in one quarter. I mean, that's what they did last week.
Yeah,
against Hawthorn and West Coast was quite similar. So
yeah, and they know that. They aren't too concerned about round 8 not putting a complete game together, but they know they have areas to improve, particularly defensively.
I think they need to put 4 quarters together against Adelaide, though. I think they're a big step up in class on what Geelong have played this year.
But a good rule of thumb, don't tip against Geelong in Geelong.
No. I had a look at their record at Geelong under Chris Scott, and it's 79 wins, 13 losses, and 3 of those losses were during COVID when they had an empty house. So
yeah, it's ridiculous.
So I give Adelaide a chance. I think they'll be very competitive, but I think Geelong is the safe tip here.
It's funny you say that because sometimes at Geelong it feels like there's an empty house even though there's a crowd, because all they do is applaud. They don't really get too fired up down at the Cattery. It's a bit nice, isn't it?
There's always a taxpayer-funded stand that's being developed as well,
exactly.
Which takes a few of the people out.
That's true. No, they're good down there.
The twilight game on Saturday sees Gold Coast against Melbourne up at Gold Coast. They have lost 10 in a row against the Demons, which shouldn't come as a huge surprise, I guess, because Gold Coast have been pretty ordinary for quite a while. But they did run the D's to 13 points last year. Are you going to be brave enough to tip an upset here?
Is this the old... what did you call it? Mindless mind games or something? Ridiculous mind games? No, I'm not going to be brave enough. I'm not going to be stupid enough, is the answer. Melbourne are too good for the Gold Coast. Although, actually, I reckon this is actually a tough game. And if there is an upset to be tipped, it's not the worst idea, because Gold Coast at home, in those conditions, which are slippery...
You should tip it then.
No, but you
Tell
don't
the
have to
punters.
tip when you're leading. If you're 3 lengths clear at the turn, you don't suddenly do something silly.
So you're like one of those. It's like Adelaide last week. You got in front and then you played it safe. And what happened? They got run down.
Yeah, this is a pathetic attempt to provoke me into tipping Gold Coast, and it's not even original. I did it last week, so I can't believe that you've gone down this path, Willie. It's unbelievable.
we're just giving the listeners something.
No. Well, I'll tip Melbourne, not with any confidence. I reckon if you're wanting to actually try to make up some ground, this is a potential upset because the Suns were much better last week. They're building. I know took Miller, which is a big blow for them.
He's the only injury on their list at the moment.
But it's a pretty important injury. But they are a chance, and this is the sort of scalp that they actually need. But I'm tipping Melbourne. I'm sticking with Melbourne.
Very brave of you, Pete. I'm tipping Melbourne. For all that, I'd love to see Gold Coast win this one because I think it would really shake up the season. But Melbourne, they're still working out their best 22 at the moment. Their forward line, I think they're experimenting. I'm intrigued to see how long they stick with Jacob Van Rooyen because I think he's... If they want him to play in September, they're going to need to give him a break at some point because I don't think he can go into September, have an influence if he's played 20, 21 games.
No,
So,
he's a promising forward, but I wouldn't
very
be
good.
overly excited about him taking you into a final series. I mean, they would want Ben Brown or Tom McDonald to be playing well. Van Rooyen, I really like him, but he's only played 6 games and he's got a lot of improvement and work to do.
We'll see how he goes. And I think do the conditions get a bit dewy at Gold
That's what I
Coast
was-
at this time of year?
Yep, definitely Stuart Dewey up there. It's a dad joke for you, Willie. Yeah, it does, and that doesn't help Melbourne, but I still think they'll win.
Yeah, I'm tipping the D's. First game on Saturday night is the old grudge match between Greater Western Sydney and the Western Bulldogs in Canberra. Now, these two sides played some crackers in the late 2010s.
They did.
They were fierce rivals. Remember that night in 2020 when this was the game after Nick Haynes had his larynx injured and they sent him to do the coin toss?
Yeah, which even Leon Cameron reckons now is
It's
stupid.
completely backfired.
Yeah.
They went way overboard.
Yeah, I think the Bulldogs, it was a little bit like Freo against the Bulldogs. It just backfired with some ridiculous show of, toughness, macho-ness.
False
But
bravado.
Wouldn't it be great, speaking of macho-ness, to be sitting up in the Tom Green bar on a cold Canberra night watching this game?
Oh,
'Cause
will we? I think it's down to 1 degree this weekend.
1 degree. It'll be freezing. So the Giants just got over the Sydney, who are only travelling, so-so at the moment, whereas the Bulldogs are starting to get their mojo back. I think they'll get Libba back, so that helps them again. Bontempelli's obviously in brilliant form. It will be a close game, but I'm going to tip the Bulldogs.
I agree with you. I'll tip the Bulldogs as well, but I'll be quite interested in watching this game to see whether the sparks fly. I think Adam Kingsley was talking up the rivalry. Luke Beveridge was sort of playing it down on Thursday morning as to looking at the number of personnel changes in that time. Giants will want to correct their record at Canberra. It's now up to 8 losses in a row. It used to be a real fortress for them when they were up and going. And they were quite competitive a few weeks ago against Brisbane.
They're going as well as the Liberal Party up in Canberra, aren't they?
But it's going to be hard for them to win. Every time you want to make a case for the Giants, you look at Sam Taylor out for 9 weeks, and that's a massive blow for them.
And all the stats, although they got up and won last week, all the stats were in Sydney's favour, so it was a little bit of a lucky escape.
The other game on Saturday night takes us out to Perth for Fremantle and Hawthorn. This probably explains why I'm watching the Giants-Dogs game.
I was just thinking.
This is a very hard game to watch.
There have been games in Perth, like last Saturday night, West Coast Carlton and Melbourne, North Melbourne was just... I was looking to the bill on the ABC. It was so boring. The bill wasn't on, by the way. And then I went to streaming services, but I got back to the footy. Fremantle win. But I don't know why, because their form isn't as good as Hawthorn. I actually don't think I'm brave enough to tip Hawthorn because they're such a young team and Fremantle really need to win this game. their back six needs to play with a little bit more freedom, which I think will help them defend better than they have been, and surely they win this game.
I think they've Hawthorn. I think I saw Luke Brewster's out, being rotated this week.
That's correct.
And also Chankwath Jath, or CJ, as his mates call him. They're two pretty decent outs, I think, for Hawthorn in a game which looks winnable on paper for them. So.
Yeah, it's surprising. I mean, it's fair enough that they're rotating, particularly Bruce out. He's been okay, but he hasn't been shooting the lights out. But he obviously gives them stability, and he doesn't miss. But Fremantle, as we say, even with those two guys out or in, they'll still win. Yeah,
the Hawks gave Freo a decent challenge last year when the Dockers were a better side. But I think at home you've just got to be safe. Tip the Dockers.
Jager O'Meara has got to do something.
There's a few of them that's got to do something.
Oh, jeepers. Come on.
Kicking off Sunday footy, we're heading over to Adelaide for Port Adelaide against Essendon. Port were the team where that game where Essendon completely fell apart, which triggered drastic change at that footy club last year. They're a different team now, aren't they, Essendon, compared to what they showed last year? Can you make a case for them, for our legion of Essendon supporters listening out there?
Well, Marnie has tipped Essendon, so that's one strike against them. No, I'm joking, Marnie. Port Adelaide, I can make a case for Essendon. They actually responded really well against Geelong because they were 6 goals down, and they looked like the side you described last year would have lost that game by 15 goals. But they fought back. A few of their players started to play bravely, let's say. Jake Stringer and Dylan Shield got ahead of the footy a little bit, and it worked for them. They had a bit of momentum up, and they could have really started to frighten Geelong, but they were able to find a steadier. They're much more robust. Their defensive system's more robust, but they will struggle against Charlie Dixon, Todd Marshall up forward for Port Adelaide, because they weren't able to control Tom Hawkins or Jeremy Cameron, and it is a real weakness with Jaden Laverde gone. So, look, the only case I can make for them is that they have got a midfield that could actually get the ball into their forward half and trap it in there and score and make it hard for Port Adelaide. But beyond that, I think Port Adelaide will win.
I think they need to do a lot right this week, Essendon, to get up. I think having 7 days, a bit of a normal week, give them a bit of a chance to freshen up. But they've been good this year.
Port Adelaide feel like a top 6 team, whereas Essendon
they were very good
like
last week when they against St Kilda. It was like a real finals type game in May or April, whatever.
We may see last year as a blip for them, and Ken Hinkley's coaching well, and Jason Horne-Francis is obviously playing great footy.
Yep, we're both tipping Port.
Yep.
The main game on Sunday afternoon, Collingwood against the Swans at the MCG. It's the first time that these two teams have played at the MCG since that infamous game in 2013 when Adam Goodes was racially sledged. So, but Pies have lost 4 of their last 6 against the Swans.
The great Adam Goodes. How many have they lost? There's
4 of the last 6, but they've all been away.
Yeah, no, Collingwood wins this because it's at home, and Sydney's form at the MCG in their last 2 games against Melbourne and Geelong in the grand final has been woeful. And they also are coming off a disastrous 1-point loss. Collingwood's not going that well, which sounds ridiculous because they're on top of the ladder, but their first 3 quarters, albeit with the 5-day break, they just looked like they had a bit of lead in their socks and they weren't running on top of the ground. So they're defensively, they're very aggressive, and Sydney might be able to get hold of them with Tom Papley being able to sit back a little bit and Buddy and use their pace going back towards goal to trouble Collingwood, but they need to win key contests around the half back line or half forward line to actually manage to do that. I think Collingwood freshened up with Pendlebury back and potentially Mason Cox-O'Low. It's very much a 50-50, and we won't even know that until Sunday probably, have the talent to beat Sydney.
Yeah, I think it'll be close. I think the Swans will be stung by last week. But, I mean, they've lost 2 games by really small margins. I mean, with the have had Florentine in his Weet-Bix against Port. He probably makes a distance.
Yeah, that's right.
And one matchup I'm really keen to see Buddy Franklin play this week. Surely Darcy Moore gets him. It'd be a risk otherwise, because if you take care of Buddy, then someone else has to bob up for goals. I'm tipping the Pies, but I think it'll be a really good game to watch Sunday afternoon. And the final game of the round, the Sunday twilight, North Melbourne against St Kilda. This looks one-way traffic. We're both St Kilda, aren't we? In this one?
Absolutely. You can't tip North Melbourne. It'll be interesting to see what North Melbourne do at selection, given there is a bit of commentary, and I think it's reasonable that they have played a reasonably... Well, you've been alerting me to it as well. A fairly experienced team. If they can get some of the young guys in and have a look at them against St Kilda, a tough, hardened unit under Ross Lyon, it'll be good to watch.
Actually, we got a bit of an explanation from Alistair Clarkson as to why they're doing that. He wants to see what the old guys have got before he makes a decision.
No, I
on
understand
their futures.
that.
So
I think that's reasonable as well.
It's a fair call. I mean, first half of the season, see what they've got, and then invest in the youth afterwards if they don't measure up any longer. But we'll both tip St Kilda for that. So that wraps up our Round 8 Footy podcast. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you via email on realfootypod@theage.com.au. Check out the rest of the expert tips at theage.com.au/AFL. The podcast will be back next Monday. Have a good footy weekend and hopefully your club wins.